Breaking tonight, a massive invasion of illegal immigrant children with potentially dangerous diseases being transported around the country by our very own government, and you could be at risk. Welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. Much more on what could become a dangerous public health issue later in the show. But first to Iraq and my open. So what should we do? Send in more troops to protect sacrifices already made? Cut a deal with the devil, Iran? Or let the Sunnis and Shias duke it out themselves? I've told you that you need to be afraid because they are coming for you. The ISIS assault, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, signals the beginning of the reverse crusade. They are coming for us. To them, we are the infidels. But I, for one, am not willing to let one more American die or come home with fewer limbs from that part of the world. Americans have shed enough blood there. My resolution? Airstrikes. Bomb them. Bomb them, keep bombing them, bomb them again and again. And I don't care how long it takes. Just take out ISIS, take out their convoys, and take out those troops. And even though our president says he didn't know, they told us they were coming for us. The head of this band of savages, Abu al-Baghdadi, was released by the Obama administration and started ISIS 1 year later in 2010. On his way out of Camp Bucca, where the worst of the worst terrorists are held, he threatened his American jailer, "See you in New York." ISIS is a fanatical religious terrorist organization, and if you think they are nothing more than ragtag rebels, you are wrong. They are a sophisticated band of militants who add to their ranks by emptying out jails and have $1.5 billion, oil fields, control of major Iraqi cities, and who continue their atrocities, now 30 miles from Baghdad. And as they march, they slaughter thousands of moderate Muslims who aren't extremist enough for them, all the while posting the most gruesome videos of mass executions and beheadings. They have a centralized command structure superior to Iraq's military command. With corporate reports and savvy social media, they measure their performance by the number of deaths. Now, Mr. President, you may see yourself as a war hero.
The tide of war is receding.
Core al-Qaeda is on its heels, has been decimated.
The world is less violent than it has ever been.
The truth? There has been a 60% increase in radical Islamist terrorism since you've been in office. And you just keep letting these guys out. Like the Bergdahl trade and the 5 terrorists, you didn't have the balls to try and Gitmo or federal court. You were simply clueless, a paper tiger who only knows how to cut and run. And here's the kicker. There have been reports that say ISIS was trained by U.S. instructors at a secret base in Jordan to prepare them to fight President Assad as rebels. Since the Benghazi massacre, reports are that the annex was a front for a CIA operation shipping arms to the anti-Assad forces through Turkey. It's your feckless, weak foreign policy on the world stage that is creating a danger zone for all Americans. You and Hillary armed and trained terrorists and gave them true battlefield experience. And then you did a cut and run in Libya and Iraq, leaving our weapons behind. The irony, Mr. President, it will be with our taxpayer-funded weapons that they will be coming for us. So now that your numbers are in the tank, 54% say you're not able to lead, you have a 41% job approval rating, 37% foreign policy approval, you now pick up the ringleader of that Benghazi massacre? Our special forces now arrest Katala? Wow. The guy was in plain sight for 2 years, interviewed by the New York Times, the London Times, CBS, CNN, Reuters, and Fox. We all found him. We all chatted with him. And as American drones flew overhead, he flips them the bird. So why 2 years? Why did you wait? Could it be, Mr. President, that if you arrested him sooner, he could have debunked that despicable video theory? You know, the one you all lied about? Can you imagine? You indict Katala for killing Ambassador Chris Stevens, and he comes in and he says, "You dumb schmucks, what video? We killed you because we're al-Qaeda's cousin, Ansar al-Sharia. We kill Americans." Mr. President, Americans don't trust you for good reason. We're not convinced you even know who the enemy is. You release terrorists, you cut deals with Iran, you dance around with your political correctness while they sharpen their knives. Mr. President, you are playing a very dangerous game for which you are ill-prepared, and it is the American people who will suffer. And that's my open. With me now, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Fox News contributor John Bolton. Good evening, Ambassador. What is America's interest, if any, in Iraq today?
Well, I think we have a very substantial interest in the conflict we see unfolding in front of us and how it comes out. That doesn't mean to me necessarily getting involved militarily on one side or the other. I think if you calculate what's most at stake in the broader region, it's still the threat from Iran, from its nuclear weapons program, from its financing and arming of terrorists around the world. So that's one reason I would not put military advisors in or otherwise cooperate with the al-Maliki regime, which is effectively a subsidiary of the Ayatollahs in Tehran.
Yeah, precisely. And if our principal enemy is Iran, why would we send 300 advisors to help Nouri al-Maliki when we're supporting then the Shiites, who are essentially Iraq and Iran?
Right. Well, under the control of Iran, at least the al-Maliki government is now. Even the Shiites are divided, and some have called for al-Maliki to be replaced. That would be a step forward. But let's look at the Sunnis, too. You're absolutely right. ISIS is, if anything, worse than al-Qaeda in terms of its terrorist threat. But there are other Sunnis, tribal leaders, even former Baathists from the Saddam era, who don't like being oppressed by al-Maliki any better than anybody else. And they're fighting against al-Maliki, too. They're not necessarily our enemies. So the point is, the situation on the ground in Iraq is very confused at this point, not the kind of environment to put in American forces. And it diverts us, as the Obama administration has been diverted for 5.5 years, from the main enemy. And the main enemy is Iran.
Well, can I ask you, do you think there can be any kind of effective partition of Iraq? Would that solve the problem? You give some to the Sunnis, the Kurds, and the Shias.
Well, I think Iraq is moving in that direction. I don't think that outcome is inevitable. But if you look at the map of what ISIS and its Sunni allies have taken, some people have said Baghdad's going to fall, the country's going to fall. No, it's not. What they have taken is basically the Sunni Arab part of Iraq. And that is a prescription, if they're able to hold it, which is another open question. But if they're able to hold it, I think that would result effectively in partition. Look, the Kurds have been de facto independent for 20 years already.
All right. And what do you think about what has happened? I mean, the administration, again, seems to have been caught off guard. I mean, should we have known this? Should we have seen it coming? Or is this, you know, just the excuse that the administration uses for everything from the VA to the IRS? I mean, they don't know anything. Should they have known about this?
They certainly don't know anything, and I think that's another subject for a legitimate congressional investigation, nonpartisan to be sure, because if the intelligence community thought this was coming and the White House didn't pay attention, that's very serious indeed. I think it's just part of the Obama administration's disinclination to pay attention to threats to American national security around the world. This is just the most recent in a long list, sadly.
Well, and you know, the takedown of Katala, I mean, 2 years later, and I have to tell you, I'm glad that they finally arrested him, but I mean, how do they justify the fact that everybody and his mother spoke to this guy, and now, you know, that his numbers are low, he decides to make an arrest in the Benghazi case?
Well, I think there's a legitimate question. Why the timing now? I mean, you can't pin it down to a day or maybe even a week. I acknowledge the military and the intelligence community need some time to put it together. They could have done it 16 or 18 months ago. There's no reason they waited this long, at least no good reason in my view. And that's the subject for another congressional investigation.
And, you know, this whole idea of the indictment against Catala, it's interesting that they don't indict him or charge him with what happened at the annex, but only at what happened with the ambassador at the consulate, which tells me, Ambassador, that, you know, they would have had to have admitted that it was premeditated to get in the rocket-propelled grenades, et cetera, that was used on the annex. And then they would have to contradict themselves. I think it's all about the politics of Catala and his coming here and saying, you're all crazy. There was no video. We did it because we hate you.
Yeah, look, he's going to use this trial in federal court in Washington, which looks to be the venue, as a propaganda campaign against the United States. And it reflects the fundamental philosophical mistake Obama's made. This is not a criminal law matter. The war on terrorism, which was launched against us, should be treated as a war. This guy should be on his way to Gitmo for a long, long time of very intensive investigation.
Ambassador, with all due respect, we send him to Gitmo and we let him go. We don't even try them. Look at the 5 that were traded for Bergdahl.
No, it's a travesty what Obama's doing, and we are going to be much less safe all around the world as a consequence of this. A lot of these releases took place at the end of the Bush administration. That was a mistake, too. There's a nonpartisan comment for you.
All right, good. Enough blame to go around. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And stick around, a packed show tonight, more in Iraq, and are Americans in danger from the thousands of immigrants who are crossing our borders? The latest IRS shocker, and what can the Benghazi terrorists tell us about possible future attacks? And vote in tonight's Insta poll. What do you think happened to Lois Lerner's emails and the hard drive? Facebook or tweet me at Judge Jeanine. We're going to read your answers later in the show.